And the stream should be starting. There's lag, so we're waiting.
Yep.
I'm waiting for you guys in the chat room to tell me when you can hear us and see John and myself.
Oh, I see an ad.
They can see, and they can, hey, there we go. Look at that. Some people have ads, some people don't.
Mm-hmm.
I'll wait about 30 seconds, folks, before we actually begin. Let the ads get through. And don't worry, I won't run any of them while we're doing this. If it happens, it's Twitch, not me.
Yeah. That's fine. It doesn't bother me, obviously.
Hold on, guys. There we go. All right. It is on.
At least you have it. I can't see it.
I can see it. If you guys don't have sound, you might want to check your side because everybody else can hear, right?
I can hear you, yeah.
Okay, good.
Sorry.
Yeah, they can hear. I just got to make sure. You always got to test. Well, hello and welcome everybody to MMORPG.com's interview with systems designer John Peters of Guild Wars 2. John, welcome.
Hey, thanks.
Anything you want to say to this rowdy bunch before we get started?
Yeah, I'm enjoying reading the comments on the side of the stream.
Is that going to distract you, or are you not going to be able
to... that's probably actually, I'm going to just do that for 45 minutes.
Let's just read the chat, and then we won't have to talk about professions or traits. Is that cool?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
Let's see. LMFAO. I don't like them. They're a terrible band. Okay. Let's move on. Well, let's just dive right into it, because I know we actually have a limited amount of time. First, we'll start with a couple of my questions, and then we'll get right to the questions we picked directly from our users at MMORPG. Okay, so, John, tell me, what are the driving design philosophies behind creating Guild Wars 2's professions? They seem very different than what we're used to.
Wow. Okay. So...
In 30 words or less.
I would just say versatility is the number one thing. We just try and give them kind of play styles rather than roles. So, we talk a lot about how we don't think you need to have fixed roles, and we want people to play together and actually have team play and not be dependent on each other. So I think the main thing is we look at them and try to figure out both from like a just immersion or like lore standpoint, what are the archetypes we want, and from a gameplay and like play style perspective, what are the archetypes we want. And I think a lot, I've seen this said a couple times now, that a lot comes down to, like, it's not just the professions. What we really try and focus on is like this profession and this weapon together, because that actually determines a lot more about what happens.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. So in general then, when it comes to the encounters, what is the team's approach into balancing these classes without the sort of Holy Trinity design? And then conversely, how does that differ when you guys go to balance those classes or professions in PvP?
We don't really try and do it too differently until problems arise. There are some obvious things like, AoEs that are pulsing AoEs. Tend to be a little bit more effective against, AI than players. Especially the better players, you won't see them standing around. So there's some of that, but our basic approach is to look at a couple of things. There's kind of two things that make a skill useful. One is how good is it at actually doing what it does, and then how versatile is a skill. So, for instance, Eviscerate, one of the highest damage skills in the game. So it doesn't need to do a lot of other things, because you're going to want to bring that, if you want to hit like as hard as you can, like that skill is necessary, So it's really easy to get a sense of what you want out of that skill. Then on the other side, you have skills like Savage Leap, which you can use to close on people, you can use to run away from people, you can use it to jump over gaps in terrain.
Or to just look awesome.
You can use it to do damage. So it's just, you lost me, you said?
I said it's just to look awesome, too. You fly.
Oh, yeah, sure. That's not my fault, though. So, so basically, I think it's just about looking at that and then looking at, the overall build of the weapon and what are the tools and how do they work together. In Guild Wars 1, it was a lot of you build these tools to work together, kind of like a puzzle where there's, all right, I'm going to have a thing that knocks a guy down, I'm going to have a thing that does damage to a knockdown guy, and then I'm going to have another thing that knocks down. And so you just kind of build them all together and it kind of created very, very distinct stuff, but it forced you a little bit more into a rotation. A lot of these games are a lot about like skill rotations. Yeah. It's like I do 2-2-1, 2-2-1, 3, 2-2-1, 2-2-1, 3. Because it's built that way. And I think that what we tried to do is make it so that you're actually thinking about and like looking at the game and saying you can't just like Savage Leap. You don't just hit it when you need to hit it. Like you only hit that when you need to get away, when you need to chase, when you need to move over something. And so the decisions are a lot more organic, I think.
Okay. So it's not really necessarily about balancing stat-wise. It's more about balancing functionality.
Yeah, I think it's about balancing what tools we give you. I think the way we built the whole system, like, yeah, we're going to have to balance the numbers, and we've been actually doing a lot of that recently. But what's more important is, like, making sure that everyone has a, like, purity, like the weapons have purity of purpose, that there's diverse tool sets in each weapon, but that there's also... if I bring a sword warrior, I'm giving up mace, and like that means I can't do this, and I need to play this way when I bring the sword. Okay. We talk about this a lot because a lot of people try and say like, well, what build are you going to bring to counter their build? And there's some of that, and more of it than there is in most games, so maybe a little less than there is in Guild Wars 1. But like the main thing is how well do you use your tools that you brought?
Absolutely.
And mastering those. So.
Okay, excellent. Well, and then in that case, let's get right to the community's questions, because I'm sure they're going to want to know the stuff that they actually asked. The first one, right off the bat, is from a user named Death Angel with 2 L's. He or she, I guess, said, since every profession has the ability to heal, is it safe to assume that there will not be a profession which has Mortal Strike or the heal reduction ability?
Well, it's actually not. So how we do heal reduction right now in the game is there's a debuff, Poison, which degens you but also reduces heals. So anyone that has access to that, which in some way everyone does just because of our cross-combo system, but those are the people who we want to be able to debuff that healing stuff. So we do have access to that, but it's a little bit different. Like I said, our debuff and buff system is very pared down. So there are literally, I think, 11 debuffs that are common, which are the conditions, and 8 buffs, which we call boons. And it really helped us to like narrow down the balance. So we know when someone is applying that healing debuff, they're applying poison. They're not like one guy's got Mortal Strike, one guy's got something else, and something else. There's not like this huge set. We know what a good poison is. A good, a 5-second poison is strong. A 3-second poison is medium. And so we kind of have these numbers all set. So when we go to balance skills, we can just look at things and say, oh, this is doing an 8-second poison. That's really, really strong. And why are we doing that? And what's the cooldown of the skill? And it's really easy to. It helps us to kind of narrow in on balance.
Okay, excellent. Then let's go right to the next guy then. His name is Kev Shoot It, I think all one word. Is the trait system being balanced for builds that want to spread out points across as many trait lines as possible? Or is it better to specialize in one? Or will both be viable?
We've seen so far that both are viable. You kind of have this thing where people talk about, like, why are there the attributes and why are these things mixed together? So the nice thing we get is when you want to max out attributes, you have to specialize in lines, right? So if you want to do the most damage you can do and pump all the way into power, you need to specialize that line, spend 30 points in. But when you open up that first major trait slot, you've got all 12 choices available to you. So there's a sort of a sense of diminishing returns of major traits there, where the first one is the most important one because you pick the one that you want the most.
Okay.
And if you don't want a second one, it starts to deter you from going, at least 20 points into the line, and then certainly 30 if there's not a third one that's going to synergize with your build. So there's this kind of back and forth game of how many points do I want to spend, how many lines do I want to get? Oh, I see, like, I want a major trait from each of these lines because I can see a build that kind of goes between all of these together, but that means I've spent 50 of my points. So the most I can do now is maybe max out one other line, and then I don't want to do that because it turns out this other line, 5 points more, gets me this minor trait I want. And you just start making all these decisions.
And how easy would it be for somebody to go back and mess around with it and change it again?
Well, so like I said, like we've said, in PvP, you literally just press a reset button and then you pump the points back in. In PvE, it's super cheap cost. You just go to this NPC and respec. And actually, out in the field, you can still respec your major traits. So one thing I know people have been talking about on the forums is like the whole, there's this major trait that's sword only, and I switch away from sword, and I still have this major trait. Well, the major traits you can switch out the field, so that concern really shouldn't be a big deal to anyone. On top of that, I think we only showed, no, we didn't show every major trait in the last build, and so people have their lists and stuff, but actually every line's going to have 12 of them, and even a good 30% of the ones we showed are now gone and have been replaced by better ones, and we generally try and make a good like 50-50 split of specific ones that are, hey, this one improves this weapon or this type signets, and 50% of them are, this is just a general thing that you're going to want no matter what, and it just kind of is a build-defining thing. And so there's so much choice there that, if anything, I think the only thing is people are going to be overwhelmed by it. But
that's a good thing, though. More choice, the better. Okay, well, the next question comes from a guy named Ema Cacao, or Ema Caco, E-M-A-C-A-C-O. I'm not even going to try. It's kind of a long one, so bear with me. With the latest information about attributes, there has been some concern that the attributes may overly influence which weapons you can effectively use together. For example, a Mesmer with a greatsword would seem to benefit mostly from power, while a Mesmer with a staff mostly from either malice, expertise, or concentration, depending on their focus. So, here's the question. What if you want to play a Mesmer that uses a greatsword in one weapon set and a staff in the other? Would you be less powerful than a Mesmer using a greatsword and a sword and offhand because they both benefit highly from power, and you have to split your attributes between different focuses for the different weapon sets? Whew!
Alright, well, it's a really, really, really good question. So, but luckily I have an answer. So one thing is, people look at these trait lines and I do this too a lot, and we always have to retrain ourselves. You don't look at it and say, what trait line am I going into? It's more, where am I spending all my points? You spend 70 points, and a trait line only has 30, so you absolutely have to spend points in at least 3 lines.
Okay.
So, to some extent, it rarely comes up that this is the case, but that's not. And that's a really important thing to know when you're thinking about building traits, is like, you don't think like, I'm going down this line that's going to give me power, I'm going warrior strength. Like, that's not how it works, right? You generally are thinking 3 to 4 lines, you know. I'm going to spend max out 2 and do 10 in another. I'm going to go 20, 20, 20, 10, you know. And so you're generally thinking more along the lines of, how far am I going and which the minor traits and the major traits define the builds more. Okay. And so the second point I'm going to make is that the attributes, you already have a really good solid base amount. So if you're going condition damage, you can get condition damage bonuses from your gear. You can get condition damage bonuses because you're just level up. And so your condition damage isn't going to be determined just by putting traits into condition damage. So if you have one of your weapons that's really condition damage heavy, but you only put 10 points in, you're missing out on, you know, a few hundred points of condition damage, which is maybe like 5% damage there. Okay. But, you know, you're giving that up because you want to get, when you give that up and you're full power, it's not like the weapon that does conditions only does conditions. It still attacks and does hits. So like the points you're putting into power there are then helping that too. It all just kind of ends up blending together pretty well. You don't really see these forced weapon combinations. I think more to the point that I was saying earlier, you don't go into a weapon because you can squeeze like 3% DPS out of it, right? You go into it because it has tools that you need. And that's like what the whole game is founded around. Like, it's not about like, what is my DPS meter and am I meeting this meter? Because half of the time it doesn't matter because you just got, like, kicked and you're flying